Panic buying has once again swept China. This time it isn't for food, but sea salt. Why? Insane paranoia about Fukushima fanned by the Chinese Communist Party. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. Throughout China, people are terrified by this announcement.
To Japan now, where over 1 million tons of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant has begun to be released into the Pacific Ocean.
Yes, Fukushima is releasing nuclear-contaminated water back into the oceans yet again. The Simpsons predicted it. China is calling it an extremely selfish and irresponsible act and said Japan was passing an opened wound onto the future generations of humanity. And government organs are making sure the Chinese people are terrified. And it certainly does sound scary. 1 million tons of nuclear-contaminated water being released into the oceans. So is panic buying sea salt before it all gets contaminated the rational thing to do? Well, believe me, the CCP isn't stoking the population's fear because it's concerned for people's well-being. It has ulterior motives. I'll tell you why they're doing it in just a moment. But first, keep in mind that the water stored in these containers isn't being released all at once. It'll be done over the course of 30 years. And an independent 2-year review by the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, found Japan's plans to release treated water consistent with international safety standards. Nevertheless, China has banned all seafood from Japan in response, saying it was to protect the health of Chinese consumers. Hey, China, if you're concerned about the health of Chinese consumers, maybe clean up all the pollution China is pumping into people's drinking water? But the ban is going to do some real damage to Japanese businesses. China and Hong Kong buy over $1 billion worth of Japanese seafood every year. Just a reminder why you shouldn't do any business with China. You'll get screwed anytime the Chinese Communist Party goes after you for political reasons. And make no mistake, this isn't about people's health or the environment, especially since Chinese nuclear power plants release way more radioactive water than Fukushima. I hear hypocrisy is very slimming. Never mind, it doesn't work. No, the CCP's reaction to Fukushima is entirely political. The CCP has always used anti-Japanese hatred as a distraction from domestic problems. Imperial Japan did a lot of horrible things to China when it invaded in World War II. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't want anyone to ever forget it. A huge chunk of Chinese primetime TV is of Japanese soldiers being implausibly slaughtered. How implausibly slaughtered? Try Kung Fu Master ripping a Japanese soldier in half. So back in 2012, when China was trying to seize claim to some Japanese islands, the CCP flipped the switch, activated the anti-Japanese sentiment, and massive anti-Japanese riots broke out all over China. The CCP is trying to tap into that energy over Fukushima. China's economy is headed into a recession. Youth unemployment got so high they just stopped reporting it. What a perfect time to remind everyone that they hate the Japanese and not the Chinese Communist Party. And it does seem to be working. People are so afraid of nuclear-contaminated seafood, huge quantities are being dumped. Seafood stalls are empty. This woman is going nuts. And this guy is vowing to fight Japan to the death. And this terrified kid cut Japan off a map because he wants it to disappear. I bet that kid had a teacher like this. She actually said maybe your descendants will be mermaids. Wear that on a t-shirt in China and you'd be sent to jail. Remember, China is polluting the water with way more nuclear waste than Fukushima. But this is having serious consequences for Japanese people. Random ramen houses in Tokyo have been getting cursed out on the phone by Chinese callers. And Japan told citizens visiting or living in China that they should probably not speak Japanese out loud and should pay close attention to their surroundings to avoid being attacked. Not even kids are safe. Stones were thrown at a Japanese school in Qingdao last week, and another Japanese school elsewhere in China was pelted with eggs. But I wouldn't want you to think this is all Chinese people. You just won't hear about them, because while Chinese social media was full of denunciations of Japan, some messages that took Japan's side were censored. But the CCP's targeting of Japan isn't just about distracting from the party's mismanagement of the country. It's also about sending a message to Japan. Earlier this month, President Biden met with the leaders of Japan and South Korea. They're going to be doing more military cooperation, and they specifically denounced China's, quote, dangerous and aggressive behavior. Japan also joined US-led sanctions against advanced chip-making machines to China. And Japan is becoming very overt about its support of Taiwan. The CCP isn't happy about any of this, and is telling Japan to get in line, or else China will go nuclear. And want proof that what China is doing is way worse than Fukushima? I'll show you a video about that, but first, it's time to answer a question from the 50-cent army, fans who support the show on Patreon. Today's question comes from Gary San. If China does start World War III, which Asian states do you think will stand against or join hands with China, particularly in Southeast Asia? That's a very important question, Gary, and I think a lot of it will have to do with what the US does. You see, back in 2012, the Chinese Coast Guard occupied the Scarborough Shoal. Both China and the Philippines claim it. It looked like the two countries would come to blows over it, so the Obama administration sent a guy named Kurt Campbell to negotiate. He made a deal where both sides would leave on a certain date. When that day came, the Filipino side left, and China didn't. And the US did nothing. China still occupies the Scarborough Shoal to this day. Now, that sent shockwaves throughout Southeast Asia. Every country in the region saw that and realized they couldn't rely on the US to have their backs against China. And so many started drifting closer to China. Kurt Campbell, by the way, has only failed up and is currently the Biden administration's Asia czar. So, if China decides to attack Taiwan, everyone in Southeast Asia will be looking to see what the US does. Does it stand and fight? Or will it abandon a thriving democracy to communism? If that happens, China's sphere of influence will only grow. Thanks for your question and your support. Gary? You too can support China Uncensored on Patreon by clicking that orange button. All it takes is $1 an episode, and as I said, what China is doing is way worse than Fukushima. This video will tell you all you need to know. Check it out. Thanks for watching. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.